You know, that specific moment, yeah, not when you hit a number, not when you cross some line on a spreadsheet, not when some app notification tells you congratulations. But when you're sitting in a meeting, someone says something that would have sent your stress levels spiking 6 months ago, and you realize you just don't feel it the same way anymore. The comment lands, you register it, and then something in your chest just does not tighten the way it used to. Not because the situation changed, not because the person changed, not because the stakes got lower, because something inside you did. There is a version of financial freedom that almost nobody talks about. Not the one where you quit your job and move somewhere warm and post pictures of yourself working from a hammock. Not the retirement calculator version, the quieter version, the one where you still show up to work on Monday morning, still sit in the same meeting, still deal with the same people, but the entire texture of your day feels different because somewhere in the back of your mind, a part of you knows you do not have to be there. Not in a dramatic way, and not in an angry way, just quietly, factually, as a matter of math, you have enough runway that if this job ended tomorrow, or if you decided to end it, you would be okay. Not permanently, not forever, but long enough that the job is no longer holding the most important card in the room. That shift is real. It has a name, it is measurable, it produces documented, actual differences in how people perform at work, how they negotiate, how they handle pressure, and what happens to their earnings and their finances as a direct result of getting to it. And it happens at a specific financial threshold that is much closer than most people assume when they hear the words financial freedom. My name is Jack, I'm 56, and I have felt both sides of this. The years when the job owned me completely, when a rumor of layoffs would genuinely keep me up, when a bad performance review felt like a verdict on my life, when every difficult week at work carried a weight that had nothing to do with the work itself and everything to do with how little cushion I had behind me, and then the slow, almost imperceptible shift as that started to change. If this video ends up changing how you think about what you are actually building toward with your money, hit subscribe. It genuinely helps more than you'd think. Quick note, I'm not a financial advisor and nothing here is financial advice. These are patterns I've watched play out over and over in real numbers over a long time. Let's start with what this shift actually is, because most people describe it wrong. They call it financial independence. And that phrase has been attached to so many retirement calculators and spreadsheets and financial blogs and podcasts that it has lost almost all of its practical meaning. You hear it and your brain immediately goes to a number, 4% withdrawal rate, 25 times your annual expenses, some faraway target you are either close to or nowhere near. And if you are nowhere near it, the whole concept just feels theoretical. Something that happens to other people. Something to think about later when things are more settled. But there is a threshold that comes long before full financial independence, a much closer threshold. One that does not require you to be free from needing income altogether. It just requires you to have enough saved, enough accessible, enough space between you and the next bad thing that your relationship with your job quietly and fundamentally changes. Not because the job got better, not because you like it more, because you stop being afraid of losing it in the same urgent, immediate way. The research calls it different things in different fields. Behavioral economists call it option value. Psychologists call it perceived autonomy or locus of control. The street version is FU money, which is blunt but captures something the academic terms do not quite reach. A 2021 study published in the journal Psychological Science, building directly on earlier research by Nobel Prize-winning economist Angus Deaton and researcher Matthew Killingsworth at the University of Pennsylvania, found that the emotional quality of everyday life continues to improve as financial security increases, but that the nature of what improves changes significantly at specific thresholds. Below a certain level of financial cushion, money's primary job is reducing active fear and stress. Above it, money begins producing something qualitatively different, a genuine felt sense of agency, of being the person making choices rather than the person waiting to find out what happens to them. The job stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something you choose to participate in. That is the shift this video is about. So what does the number actually look like? And this is where I want to get specific, because almost all of the conversation around this topic stays at a level of vagueness that is completely useless. Build a cushion, have savings, get yourself in a position of strength. Those are real ideas attached to no real instructions. They tell you nothing you can act on. Here is the concrete math. The traditional financial independence number, built on the 4% rule, first formally documented by financial planner William Bengen in 1994 based on decades of historical market return data, says you need roughly 25 times your annual expenses invested in growing before you can walk away from work income entirely. If your annual spending is $60,000, that is $1.5 million invested. If it is $45,000, that is $1.1 million. These numbers are historically well supported, and they describe a real finish line. But they describe a finish line. They do not describe the shift I am talking about, which happens far earlier. What the behavioral research points to is a runway number, not a retirement number, a runway. Specifically, enough liquid, accessible, penalty-free savings to cover somewhere between 12 and 24 months of your actual expenses without touching your retirement accounts, without selling property, without changing your lifestyle in any meaningful way. Not a bare-bones survival budget. Your real monthly spending number times 12 to 24. If your real monthly expenses, housing, food, utilities, healthcare, car payment, insurance, subscriptions, everything, run $4,000 a month, your runway target is between $48,000 and $96,000. If they run $5,000 a month, it is $60,000 to $120,000. If they run $6,000 a month, it is $72,000 to $144,000. Sitting in accounts you can actually reach within days, not months, not years, not after paying a penalty. That is the range where the texture of work changes. I have watched this pattern repeat itself enough times to be confident in it. The person who has 2 or 3 months of expenses saved experiences their job a specific way. Every review cycle feels like it carries consequences well beyond the actual review. Every tense conversation with a manager lands harder than it probably deserves. Every company-wide meeting where someone uses the word restructuring produces a specific kind of dread. The person who has 14 or 18 months of accessible runway experiences the exact same job in a categorically different way. The reviews still matter, the conversations are still real, but the dread is gone because the math has changed what losing this job actually means, and the brain responds to math whether we tell it to or not. And here is the piece that almost never gets discussed. This is not merely a psychological effect. It's not just about feeling better. The runway changes actual behavior in ways that compound forward and produce measurable differences in career and financial outcomes. Research from Harvard Business School found that employees reporting lower financial stress show higher performance ratings, better decision-making under pressure, and most critically for the long run, significantly higher rates of self-advocacy during compensation negotiations. The employee who knows they can walk away is more likely to make the ask, which means they are more likely to get what they are worth, which means they can build the runway faster, which means the shift compounds in their favor, in both directions simultaneously. The person who cannot afford to leave is also on average the person who is least likely to be paid what they are actually worth. Now, I need to talk about what accessible actually means, because this is where most people make a critical error without realizing it. Most people think of their savings as a single number. Retirement accounts, regular savings, brokerage accounts, home equity, it all gets mentally lumped together as money I have. But for the purposes of this runway calculation, they are not the same thing, not even close. Your 401k does not count toward your runway. Your IRA does not count. Your home equity does not count. These are real meaningful assets that matter for your long-term financial picture, but they are not accessible in the way this threshold requires. Not without early withdrawal penalties, not without tax consequences that can take back a significant portion of what you pull out, not without delays that in a real scenario could stretch to weeks. They are valuable, right? They are not liquid. What counts toward your runway? A high yield savings account, a money market account, a taxable brokerage account where you can sell holdings and settle within a few business days, or some combination of the three. Liquid, penalty-free, available within a week if you actually needed it. This matters more than most people realize because a meaningful number of people who feel like they have no runway actually have substantial assets. They are simply sitting in the wrong containers to provide the benefit this threshold is about. Two scenarios with real numbers. First scenario, someone with $240,000 in a 401k and $8,000 in a savings account, monthly real expenses of $4,800. Total assets look significant on paper. Actual accessible runway under 2 months. The job still owns them completely in every way that matters from Monday through Friday. Second scenario, someone with $85,000 in a 401k and $58,000 split between a high yield savings account and a taxable brokerage account. Same monthly expenses of $4,800. Accessible runway over 12 months. The job they walk into every day feels fundamentally different. Because it is fundamentally different, what it requires of them emotionally and what it costs them to walk away from it have both genuinely changed. Same approximate level of total savings, completely different experience of work, and likely completely different trajectory going forward because of how the accessible runway changes their behavior. That is the version of financial progress nobody talks about enough. And it is the version that, in my own experience watching people's financial situations change over time, produces the fastest real shift in day-to-day quality of life. Not retirement account balances growing, not net worth ticking upward on a dashboard. Because this one changes how today actually feels, not a future date. Today. Now, what does it actually take to get there? Step 1, calculate your real monthly number, not what you spend on essentials, not a stripped down survival budget. Your actual average monthly outflow across all categories averaged across the full 12 months so that annual and irregular expenses are accounted for. Multiply by 12 for your low end runway target, by 18 for the middle, by 24 for the upper end. Write that number down. It is probably more specific and more achievable than financial independence felt at the start of this video. Step 2, audit what you actually have that counts toward the runway right now. Go through every account and sort everything into 2 columns. Accessible, meaning liquid and penalty-free and reachable within a week, and locked, meaning everything else. Most people have never done this audit in this specific way. Most people are surprised by the result. Once you have the real accessible number, you know your actual gap. A gap is a problem with a solution. A vague sense of being behind financially is not. Step 3, direct new savings toward closing the accessible gap first, before adding beyond the minimum to locked retirement accounts. If your employer offers a 401k match, take the full match. That remains unambiguously worthwhile. Beyond the match, the practical and psychological return on reaching your runway target first is, in most circumstances, higher than the marginal return on additional dollars flowing into accounts you cannot access without a penalty. Once you hit the runway target, shift the full allocation back toward long-term retirement contributions and let those compound. But get the runway built first. Everything else compounds better once you have it. That is the sequence. Calculate the number, find the real gap, fill the gap first. Here is what I want to leave you with. The target most people are working toward, retirement independence, the number, is worth building. It matters, but it is far away for most people, and goals that are far away have a way of staying far away. They do not change how a hard week at work feels right now. The runway changes how this week feels. It changes how a difficult conversation with your manager lands. It changes what a bad quarter at work means for your actual sense of stability. It changes in ways that are documented and measurable the version of yourself that shows up on the days that are hard. And the version of yourself that shows up on the hard days determines what comes next. In your career, in your income, in your savings, in your life, you are not trying to escape your job. You are trying to get to the point where you are there because you choose to be there. That moment is available sooner than retirement, sooner than the 4% rule, sooner than most people think. The math is simpler than it sounds. The gap for most people in most situations is smaller than it feels right now. Drop a comment below and tell me how many months of accessible runway you actually have right now. Not retirement savings, not total assets. Liquid, penalty-free, accessible. I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know where most people land when they run that audit for the first time.